Hi, everyone. This is Alexander Lim, and welcome to another episode of Author Story. I'll be speaking today with Suzanne Adam, author of the book Notes from the Bottom of the World A Life in Chile, which you can check out right now by clicking on the Amazon link in the video description below. So, Suzanne, welcome to Author Story. It's great to have you with us.
Thank you.
Yeah, welcome. So, Suzanne, what was your inspiration for writing Notes from the Bottom of the World?
Well, Notes from the Bottom of the World is actually a collection of essays. So they were
Mhm,
inspired in different moments in my life over the last few years,
mhm,
uh, because they're essays, personal essays on a variety of topics. There's childhood memories, there's trip descriptions, trip diaries. It's a variety of things I've written over the last 4 or 5 years, and that I
mhm.
decided to put together as a collection.
Mm, okay. So, did you ever intend to publish these essays?
When I wrote them, no, not at all.
Okay.
Let's see, I don't know, it could be that some of them I thought of as maybe articles for a magazine or something
Mhm.
like that. In fact, a few of them are uh, based on blog posts that I've
Mm.
expanded. So some of them were on my blog.
Oh, okay. All right. And so, what made you decide to put everything together? Was there like an aha moment when you decide, this would go well together into a book?
Yeah, well, I just thought, look at all this work I've done, and I'd like to
Hmm.
put it out into the world. And I
Mm,
wasn't sure it would work as a book, but
mhm.
eventually it did.
All right, cool. So, for the benefit of those who may not be aware of your background, can you tell us a little bit about, where you grew up and what made you decide to move to Chile?
Fine. I grew up in Northern California in a small
Mm,
town called San Anselmo,
mhm,
uh, very close to, just across the bay from San Francisco.
mhm,
Then I went to the University of California in Berkeley. And
mhm,
when I graduated, I joined the Peace Corps
mm,
and I was sent to Colombia
mm,
in South America. I
mm,
was there 2 years, where, of course, I was able to strengthen my Spanish.
mhm,
Then I went back to Berkeley and got a teaching degree,
mhm,
and I began teaching. Uh, then, several years later, I met a handsome Chilean student named Santiago,
mm,
and we started seeing each other.
mhm,
But several months later, he had finished his studies, and his student visa expired, so he had to return to Chile.
mhm,
So I followed him,
mhm.
and we married there.
Okay.
Okay.
Yep.
Uh, I wrote about that part of my life in a previous book called Marrying Santiago.
Mm. Okay. And since then, you've been in Chile for what, about over 4 decades now, right?
Yes, 46 years. I arrived in 72 um,
Wow.
and was there for a year later. The coup occurred, the military coup.
Mhm. Right. And okay, cool. So first off, for a lot of folks, I mean, moving to another country, what maybe it sounded romantic at the time. I want to move to this place or that place and stuff like that. But when you actually do it, it's not all fun and roses. I mean, there are changes you have to make in your life and adjustments. And, let's face it, not anyone can hack it, and much less, live for 46 years in a land where they weren't born in. So, if I may ask, what were some of the changes you needed to make?
Okay, well, the first change was that our intention when we married in Chile was that we would return to California.
Hmm.
But plans do change.
Right?
And there were quite a few challenges I had to face at first. I did speak Spanish, so that wasn't a difficulty, although Chilean Spanish is quite different from the one that I knew.
Hmm.
I was an only child, so it was a challenge for me and for my parents being so far away. The
Hmm.
distance between California and Chile at that time was greater, believe it or
Right.
not,
Yeah.
because there was no internet and
Right.
we didn't even have a telephone.
Oh,
So
okay.
that was a major challenge to get used to. And I went to a big city, the capital, which is called Santiago as well.
Hmm.
And living in big city life was quite different from what I was used to.
Mm. Okay. And So what were maybe the one or two hardest challenges you had to face during this transition?
Well, I arrived in winter time there, and
Okay.
it's a lovely climate, but in winter it gets cold. Sun
Right.
City is very close to the Andes, and there's snow on the Andes,
Hmm.
and there wasn't very little. There was very little heating in the houses, and I
Hmm.
was always cold at first. So I would say that was the first challenge, and
Okay.
also. During that time, well, this is the last year of Salvador Allende's government, there were a lot of difficulties. There was a lot of social unrest, a lot of protests, and there were food shortages.
Hmm.
So that was a challenge for me, standing in line to buy a chicken, for example. This is
Right.
not something I had never experienced in the United States.
Hmm. Right. Okay. So let's get on to the other part of living in a land not your own. I mean, there are a lot of experiences to had, a lot of ways of life which aren't around when you were wherever it was where you were growing up. So what are some of these experiences that have enriched you?
The experiences that enriched me. Okay. Um,
Sounds
well,
like there's a lot.
yeah, that's a big question. Well, as I said, the first one, it was enriching to know what it's like to live with shortages of
Hmm.
all kinds.
Hmm.
Not to have heating, or not to have available many of the foods I was used to. That was a challenge, and I think it enriched me because I saw how the Chileans learned to live very frugally, and
Hmm.
that taught me to live frugally as well.
Hmm.
uh, that's something that has lasted all my life because I
Hmm.
see that there's so much waste in the world, and this was a good experience to learn that.
Hmm. Okay.
Let's see, it's hard to think of enriching experiences because it's all just kind of one big memory in my head.
Oh, okay. Okay. So let maybe help out a little bit. So
Yeah.
what were some of the realizations you have had from living in Chile, which you would not have had you lived in the United States all your life?
Okay. Well, I realized how important the natural world is to me. I
Hmm.
came from a part of Northern California that's surrounded by hills and trees and ocean. And I realized when I arrived there, living in a big city, that I missed that,
Hmm.
and but I had to create a sense of place in Chile. And so I began to do that by uh, the Andes became my point of reference. When I we'd travel out of the city, I began to learn the names of the birds and the
Hmm.
trees there,
Hmm.
and that in that way I began to put my roots down there and create a sense of place with Chile.
Hmm. Okay, okay, got that. So you mentioned some of your materials that you are a natural born tree hugger or something like
Yes,
that. So you must be very connected to the environment then.
very
I mean,
much
as you
so.
just mentioned.
Yes.
Yeah. All right. So how in your experience then, this might be a little sidetrack, but in your experience, how connected do you think people are with the natural world?
Well, it certainly varies from person to person. I mean, even among my friends, there are some that have no clue what the bird is hopping in their backyard.
Right, right.
But I try to share those pleasures that I have with my friends.
Hmm.
Uh, I think city people have to work harder at connecting to the natural world. Of course,
Hmm.
I've experienced that too, living in Santiago. It's you have to work harder to connect with the natural world. Um,
So yeah, go
I,
ahead. Sorry.
I think it's also how you're brought up. You
Hmm.
know, my boys both live in Santiago, but they are very concerned for the environment. And
Mm.
I think I uh, give the connection or attribute my parents. Sorry, but sometimes I have difficulty coming up with the right English word.
Right, right. No
For
problem, no problem.
where I grew up and my parents' interest in, the natural world around us was a great. influence in my life.
Mm, okay. And I'm just curious, how environmentally aware are Chileans in general?
Becoming very much so.
Mm,
It's a big topic there now, which pleases me. Uh, the country has is working very hard to become dependent upon solar power. The geography lends itself to solar power. They have a
mhm.
lot of desert in the north of Chile, so they're
All
becoming
right.
very concerned, and also concerned with plastic bags. They've now
Uh-huh.
been banned in the capital city and several other cities.
Hmm.
So yes, they're very much concerned.
Okay. And so, yeah, I mean, you've been all over the world, I'm sure, and you traveled to different countries. Let's say compared to other countries, how high is this degree of concern compared to yeah, to other countries?
Um, well, all I can really compare it to is maybe the States. Well,
Mm,
well, and Europe too, of course. I
okay.
think Chile is quite advanced in that respect. I think the credit goes in part to a previous cabinet minister
Hmm.
who they call the minister the secretary of energy, I guess it was,
Hmm.
who was very advanced in that progressive, I should say, in that respect. Compared to other countries, I think Chile is quite far ahead of as far as Latin American countries, and of course the United States right now is in limbo at the moment as far as the environment and energy because of the current administration.
All right. Okay. So, comparisons. I mean, as you mentioned, you're familiar with Chile and you're familiar with the United States as well. What are the differences between Chile and the United States? Socially, economically, technologically, whatever.
Hmm. Yeah, well, Chile, if you look at it on a map, the geography, it's a very isolated country. It's very far south
Mm,
and has is separated by its neighbors by the Andes and by desert. From the northern border with is the border is with Peru, and that's a
mhm,
desert. So
mhm,
it's always been a bit isolated,
mhm,
and that led to a rather inwards facing society.
mm,
But that's changed now, with modern communication. That's changed very much. But when I first got there, it was very, I don't know, think of the word, just they didn't have much influence from the outside world.
mm,
And now, Chileans, young people in Chile, they travel, they go to other countries to study. It's
mhm,
quite changed. So I would say
mhm,
it's the difference, let's say, with Europe or the States is that Chile was not very diverse
mhm,
uh, culturally or socially.
mhm.
Uh, the it was how will I say there weren't
Homogeneous.
yes they weren't very thank you there weren't
Okay.
very many other races or nationalities, and now that's really changed. Chile has become a magnet for migrants from other countries that are not doing well. Right now, there's
Mhm,
been a big influence of people from Haiti, which has
mm,
really changed the how I say the composition of the society.
mhm.
And there's many migrants from Peru, from Colombia, because they know that Chile is doing well and they want to better their lives.
Right. And how do the longtime residents of Chile regard these migrants?
Pardon, how long?
Yeah, how do the long-term residents of Chile, how do they regard these migrants? Are
Oh,
they
yes.
are they seen as friends? Are they seen as a threat? How do they view them?
Well, there's been mixed reactions. As far as
Mm,
the Peruvians and the Colombians, they've mixed in quite well because, of course, they speak Spanish.
right.
And, and like all migrants, these take the jobs at the very lowest paying level. Uh, the Haitians it's been a change for Chileans who have never seen people of a black color before, hardly
Hmm.
at all. And on the whole, I think they've been very good at receiving them. Of course, there are exceptions, but on the
Right.
whole, I think they're they've been quite good at adjusting because it's a big change for Chileans.
Right, right. I mean, traditionally they're not a nation of immigrants. I mean,
No,
as you mentioned
yeah,
before, they're
actually, it was a nation of immigrants, but immigrants from Europe. There's
okay.
quite a few Germans, um, Croatians, Italians, but not from other Latin American countries.
Not much less Central American. I mean, like you mentioned, the Haitians.
Right, yeah.
All right, okay. All right, cool. But what about some of the similarities between Chile and the United States?
Let me think. Well, first of all, I'd say between Chile and California.
Oh, okay. All
Because
right.
the states, I find the United States, each state is so unique and so different. California and Chile geographically are very similar. We have a
Mm-hmm.
very similar climate.
Mm-hmm.
Chile is like a turned upside down California. It's hot and deserty in the north
Mm-hmm.
and cooler and rainy in the south of Chile. So it's like an upside down California.
Oh, okay.
So other similarities, let's see. I would say that's the main one because language, well, no, I will say language in California, there's a lot of Spanish spoken. So there's that similarity too.
Mm,
And I've discovered some interesting connections. For example, the California state flower is the poppy, the golden
mm,
poppy, and they are
mm,
growing all over central Chile.
mm.
So there has been these connections over the years. Somehow the seeds went to Chile, through people traveling back and forth. So
Right.
that kind of a connection too.
Okay. Okay. So, let's take Chile and the United States, sorry, as nations. What do you think the two nations can learn from each other? What can Chile learn from the United States, and what can the United States like learn from Chile?
Oh, you need to give me some time to work out the answer to that
Oh,
question.
okay.
That's
Well,
the big
just off
one,
the top of your head, I mean, I got
right?
that may be a big question, but
The top of my head. What can they learn from each other? Well, I think that Americans, meaning people in the United States could learn to live more frugally
mm,
from
okay,
the experience of people who have had to live frugally. I know in the past Americans had to, but it's such a consumer society now. And
mm,
sadly, Chile is also becoming a consumer society. There are malls sprinkled
mm,
all over the cities of Chile now. So they're
right,
copying what they see is happening in the States.
mm,
So that's something that where they're getting closer together. This consumer society, what else could they learn from each other? Well, Chile has returned to democracy just over the last, I think, 20 or so years after the military rule. So obviously, they look to the states as an example of democracy.
mm,
And what the states can learn from Chile, well, as I said, the frugality. I don't know. Let's see. I can't think of something off the top of my head other than what I just
okay,
said.
all right. Well, I'm sure there are other things, but
I'm
yeah,
sure.
okay, that's it. All right, that's pretty good. That's pretty good. Okay. So I have to ask this because I mean you were born in the United States. You spent 46 years in
Mhm.
Chile. Uh, do you consider yourself more of a Chilean or more than an American at this point?
Uh, yeah, it's
Or is it?
my heart is in both places.
Oh,
I've
okay.
I've been living in Chile much longer than I ever lived in the United States. So obviously, I'm part Chilean in the way I think. Uh,
Right.
my memories are based in more in Chile. My family is in Chile. I have no family left in the States anymore, but I still am also, of course, an American. As many people, Chileans, point out to me there, I I never lose my accent. So that
Right. Right.
that is a mark that marks me right away as an American.
Right. Okay. So have you? I'm sure you've traveled around Chile. What are some of the places that you really love? I mean, the ones that really strike home for you.
Hmm. The minute you get out of the city, there's just, the minute I go out of the city, I should say, there's so much to explore and experience. The Andes are very different from the mountains of the United States. They are very bare. Well, there are parts of the United States too would be like that. There, parts of the mountains near the city of Santiago are bare. They have very little, no trees, although they do have vegetation. So they're quite stark and
Mm,
interesting. Now, of course, you go to southern Chile and it's very different. There's beautiful forests, which I love. There's the lake region, uh,
mm,
which draws people all the time. It's cooler and green.
mm,
And in the north of Chile, there's a beautiful desert area, the Atacama Desert, which
mm,
I visited on a few occasions. And then, of course, Chile has a long, long coast, a
mm,
coastline, which you can find very similar to the Pacific coast of the United States.
mm. Okay, and of course, that really, I mean, I guess it must be a nature lover's paradise. Well, kind of a nature lover's paradise, particularly for one,
You're,
for one of your disposition.
yes, right. Yeah.
All right.
The area of Patagonia is fantastic. We've gone all the way down to the very southern tip of Chile, which is actually like a jigsaw puzzle of islands and fjords and glaciers, and it's quite spectacular.
And yeah, there's a city down there, isn't there? I forgot what it's called. It starts with a V, I think. Valdavia or
Or-
Valparaiso.
Oh, no, that's right on the central coast of Chile, Valparaiso.
Oh,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah,
okay, all
that's
right. My,
central Chile, and that's a very fascinating place too. It's a port city.
oh, okay.
It's rather, let's say, bohemian and very arty. There's lots of uh, wall murals there that people have painted. It's on the hills. It's on the hills, so there's stairs going up the hills. It's quite interesting.
Oh, okay, well, yeah, there we go. My lack of my lack of knowledge about geography is showing. Sorry about that one. Okay, so let's say you came across someone, okay, who's considering moving to another country, okay, and you only had time to tell that person one thing about the possibilities that that experience will take. They could be moving for just a few months, or maybe like you, they may be staying for a few decades. What would be that one thing you would tell that person?
Um, well, it depends. I mean, if the first thing would be the language. If
Hmm.
that person doesn't know the language, I tell them that they need to be prepared to study it ahead of time. Because that can be a major barrier in getting acclimated or adapted to another country. That's
All right.
super important, the language, and to just study ahead of time and to learn about the culture and the people so that they will. And I would say to have a very open mind, to want to learn, to be curious about the
Mhm.
people in that country.
To want to learn to be curious.
I mean, to want to learn or be curious. I mean,
Oh, okay.
they need to be curious. Obviously, if they're thinking of going to another country, they must be curious.
All right, right. Okay, so curiosity and learning the language. Okay, and I guess those are the things that have really helped you out then in all your years there.
Right. And of course, this is something true of being curious, is true of life in general, being open to hearing other people's stories.
Mm, okay, got that, got that. Okay, so Suzanne, in these last couple of minutes of this interview, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share to inspire our listeners?
Let's see, words of wisdom. I think I've mentioned that how important it is to be open to learning about another country,
Mm,
to and to learn the language. I mean, I read the letters to the editor every day in the
mm,
newspaper in Chile because I want to know what the issues are. I think it's important to uh, be humble
mhm,
and to want to learn about the other culture, whatever it is. And it's taken me a while,
mhm,
but
mhm.
I don't think I'll ever feel totally at home there, but I've learned to love the country and the people, and to let's see, it's you just have to appreciate where you came from and where you are, and love them both.
Mm, okay. Well, that's a pretty good statement right there. I mean, appreciate where you came from, appreciate where you're at, love them both. I mean, that's insight right there.
I don't know if it's very brilliant, but it's what comes to me in my thoughts. I think my book shows how the things that I write about are such a variety of things that I've learned that have enriched my life. The little satisfaction can come from a tiny little spider I found in my shower to
Right,
to
right.
you know satisfactions can come from anywhere. The gentleman I met in the supermarket a few weeks ago, he turned out to be the son of a Syrian immigrant. There can be
Mm,
satisfactions everywhere. It's a matter of being open and noticing them.
right. Okay. Okay. Got that. Cool. Okay. All right then. So in closing then, the book is Notes from the Bottom of the World, Life in Chile, and the authors are guest Suzanne Adam. So Suzanne, thank you very much for being an author story. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences with us.
Thank you for having me.
All right, you're welcome. So everyone, feel free to check out Notes from the Bottom of the World, and of course, go ahead and subscribe to our channel if you like. So catch you all next time on Author Story.